my good friend, who's taken the time, even though he's in Florida right now, hot and humid Florida, which you might confuse with Texas the last couple weeks, is my guy Eric C. Henry from Horns 247 and 247sports.com, who joins us live from Florida. Man, I really appreciate you taking some time, even though technically you're on like a little bit of a work vacation. How you doing, Eric?
First off, Cam, my guy, what is going on? Appreciate the invite as always. Appreciate you including the C in the title, the name, right? Doesn't always get included. And on a serious note, since as you mentioned, I am away from Florida. Thoughts and prayers with everybody who's been affected in Central Texas. Because I've seen the news that one been away. So just want to make sure to echo that sentiment.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's begin with Texas football recruiting news from over the weekend. It was a good and I don't know if bad's the right word, but an up and down weekend for Texas football recruiting. Obviously, you added in some great pieces. Okpala, the 4-star, John Turntine, the 4-star. And then kind of the shocking news, perhaps, is Felix Ojo ends up committing to Texas Tech when the day before it felt like it was going to be Texas or Ohio State. Ends up at Texas Tech, $5 million over 3 years. Let's begin with the good news. How does the commitments of Turntine and Okpala affect the recruiting class for Texas here in 2026 before we get into the guys who didn't go the way of Texas?
Yeah, I'll start with John Turntine, kid out of North Crowley, an area certainly that has treated Texas well, Fort Worth, Texas. This has been my big take, Cam, when it comes to offensive line with the Longhorns under Steve Sarkisian, of course, position coach Kyle Flood, it's really imperative that Texas continue the pipeline of recruiting talent up front. The Longhorns have been a program that have not hit the transfer portal when it comes to offensive linemen. And it's interesting because we've seen them hit the portal darn near every other position, right? We've seen them bring a quarterback this cycle. We've seen them, bring in receivers, tight ends, defensive linemen, edge, Trey Moore, linebacker, Brad Spence, really across the board, kicker, a punter, a specialist. They've been hesitant to recruit offensive line or to recruit offensive line through the portal. I think it's twofold. One, because of the thing that I feel very strongly about. Offensive line is such a technique position, such a mental position. When you have 2, 3, 4 position coaches in your collegiate career alone, that'll mess you up, right? So I think, and Steve has kind of hinted at this. He's never outright said it, but he's kind of hinted at it. We like the way that we develop our guys, right? So let's spin that forward, and I'll bring it to the John Turntine in a second. You take a look at the offensive line over the last few years, it's all homegrown, right? And now you lose 4 starters. You are bringing in guys who are a little bit inexperienced, not necessarily young, but inexperienced, Cole Hudson, Nato Umazulu, and others. But because Texas isn't hitting the portal, it's crucial that they have that backlog, Cam, because look at it this way, right? You're not going to hit on all of them. A kid like Malik Agbo, for example, super talented, was in the heavy package a few years. He now moves on to West Virginia. You lose a couple other guys. I'm forgetting the kid's name from Florida off the top of my Peyton Kirkland, right, from a few years ago. So you're not going to hit on all of them. So you need to have a deep backlog if you're going to depend on recruiting. You talk about John Turntine again, a 4-star kid, someone whose upside seems to be really high. I love getting those guys at tackle that I think you can kind of swing into guard if they get a little bit bigger, right? Remember DJ Campbell was initially, someone who could play tackle, right? You assume slide him inside to guard. So definitely like that pickup. And then you go on the defensive side of the football, get Kosi Okpala from Houston. He kind of reminds me, and I hope this isn't just being lazy in comparison, David Benda type, right? Someone who I think has, while Benda, maybe you say his upside wasn't quite as high as I think you have here with Okpala, someone who, is a downhill linebacker, going to make plays at the line of scrimmage and just has that frame to grow into a 6'2", 6'3", 245-pound, 250-pound linebacker. He was already 6'2", 230 now, right? So you think, and even maybe a different scenario, Cam, maybe he's an edge. Maybe he's a 6'2", 6'3", 260 edge at some point in his career. So love the upside there.
The 2 guys that did not go in the way of Texas, Felix Ojo, the 5-star offensive lineman, who a couple days before the commitment date on July 4th, it was trending towards Texas, Ohio State. And then all of a sudden we see reports of Texas Tech coming in out of nowhere. And the reason why, well, a $5 million contract over 3 years using some of Texas Tech's revenue sharing, which I believe is about 5-6% of their yearly revenue devoted to Ojo. Texas Tech, you got to give it to them. They're getting very creative in ways in landing players. And in Caden Finley, the Alito wide receiver going to Notre Dame, Texas has never been able to recruit Alito for some reason. And Finley kind of following suit in the way of Jaden Greathouse, the Austin Westlake product. How will those two guys not committing to Texas impact this class?
Yeah, I'll start with Finley, and I'll kind of pair him with Jaden Greathouse. I'll give a shout out to our guy Jordan Scruggs, does a great job. We're our recruiting guy over at horns247.com. And speaking with Jordan, I don't want to speak for him, but in speaking with him, in work chats and whatnot, it kind of seemed as if this could be a possibility with both of those players going elsewhere, right? For a myriad of reasons. I still think Texas, again, talk about that backlog. They're deep at receiver. Okay, all right. Can't forget you bring in Jamie French, Khalil Lockett, Dalen McCutcheon. You have Parker Livingstone, others, right? Aaron Butler. The list goes on. They're deep at receiver. I'll say this: as long as Steve Sarkisian is the head coach in Austin, I don't think they're going to have an issue recruiting receiver. And then also, and I've made this point with you. I've made this point on the morning kickoff with Harge and Mark Henry. Texas being able to recruit the way they have at quarterback, right? Getting an Arch Manning who's willing to sit for a few years, getting a Dia Bell, someone who comes from that athletic, mentality, of course, being the son of Raja Bell. If you can get a quarterback, Cam, who at least will sit for 2 years and not hit the portal, then you've got quarterback covered. So worst case scenario, if Texas needs to dip into the portal, they can at receiver. In terms of Felix Ojo, this might not be the answer that's going to, appease most Texas fans, but I look at it as, and I'm not accusing Texas fans of hating, it's just my perspective from the broader college football landscape. Don't hate the player, hate the game, right? Because that's what the game is right now when it comes to Texas Tech. They are taking advantage of the rules, or should I say lack thereof rules, because there is still not a true structure, a true framework around this. I know the House settled and dropped in that, gave us revenue sharing, but we still don't have the guardrails and kind of the framework that I think whether it be a Steve Sarkisian or, many college football fans would want around compensation of players. So you are going to have situations like you said, Cam, where Felix Ojo looked like it was down between Texas and Oklahoma, even though he canceled his OU visit. Then Texas Tech swoops in at the last minute, and God bless the kid for getting it all guaranteed. This is not going to be a Jaden Rashada type deal where the money is promised and all of a sudden he gets to campus and it's not there, right? But I guess to spin that forward for Texas, again, it just makes the verbal commitment of Turntine and Texas will need to continue recruiting offensive line in from the high school ranks that much more crucial because you miss out on a big time talent like Ojo.
Yeah, and I think with Ojo's commitment, I think fan bases have this idea, okay, like you want to come to Texas because you want to win a national championship, right? What does a fan want? A fan wants to win a national championship. For a 16 to 18-year-old kid, you're thinking about, okay, I want to win, but also I want to do what's best for my career, and I want to make sure I can make money, right? Because all it takes is one snap, and all of a sudden you go from having a 20-year NFL career to my career ended in college, right? And so I'll never get upset with an 18-year-old. When you're offered $5 million for 3 years, guaranteed, as you pointed out, who is saying no? If I got offered $5 million right now to go to Lubbock to do a radio show for 3 years, Eric, you best believe I would have my butt out there immediately because that's money that is life-changing, right? Felix is set up for the rest of his life. Now, if you want to talk about, is he going to have the best coaching and the best development that's going to set him up for the league? Different argument, but I'll never get upset with a kid doing what's best for his career because playing football is his career. It's not always about, ring legacy that's so discussed so much in sports talk, TV, and radio. And that's just, we saw whether it's Najee Kennedy or other players, this is just the new way of how college football works.
It's so funny. In college sports. It's funny you gave the example of you in a radio show because that's what I like to do when people say, oh man, how could you take the money? Is it all about the money? I like to use real life working examples. We all leave jobs every day for pay raises. I left my previous position covering Group of 5 football to cover Texas in part because my salary is being doubled. Let's just call a spade, right? So, and I guess to kind of give a more substantive, college sports answer, you're going to have to look at this in a way like professional sports. And what I mean by that is this. Your favorite player may leave the Dallas Cowboys, right? And they may sign with, maybe the Cowboys isn't the best example because, they've been win challenged, right? But let's say, insert franchise that Kansas City Chiefs. They may leave the Kansas City Chiefs and sign with, the Las Vegas Raiders. not because it's their best chance to win, but because finances played a part, right? And you have some free agents who are motivated by finances, some are motivated by winning. You're going to have to adopt that mentality here in college sports because guess what? 16 through 18-year-olds, they're even less evolved than the 25, 26, 27-year-olds we're talking about making those grown decisions. So you got to kind of view it in that sense, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Miles Turner, former Longhorn basketball player, took more money to leave an Indiana Pacer franchise that was a game away from winning an NBA championship to go to the Milwaukee Bucks because the Milwaukee Bucks were willing to pay him a lot more money. Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough to do because the way that college sports works in the pageantry and the love of the game, because, at one point, you like college football more possibly because the players weren't getting played as opposed to the NFL. That's gone now. Like, as a fan, you have to understand that the difference between NFL in college is very negligible now because of the way the house settlement has worked in revenue sharing in the conferences. So I think it all comes back to just not hating the player, just hate the game. And unfortunately, the game gets paid a lot of money by ESPN and Fox to have these games aired in the college football playoff and all this stuff. It's not changing anytime soon. It never will be changed.
No, Cam, I mean, listen, I could belabor you with examples, but you hit the nail on the head. And the big thing for me, I think, when you just take a look at this structure as a whole, right, and you talked about it, is just becoming – I don't think your love or fans' love for college sports, it needs to evaporate because it is becoming more and more professional. I think the love just has to evolve. I think the lens with which we view it has to evolve. I'll never forget Steve Sarkisian, a spring presser, talking about, hey, he didn't want to entertain hypotheticals. If you've ever, interviewed Steve, he's not a big hypothetical guy. But the fact of the matter is it was coming down the line, the house settlement, and him saying he doesn't believe that student athletes want to be employees and coaches don't want to necessarily coach employees. And I agree with him. I think his heart is in the right place, but you can't ignore the fact, and again, this brings it full circle to the conversation we're talking about. You can't ignore the fact that, guess what, Cam? There's going to be a point in time which Texas signs a receiver that makes more than Chris Jackson.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a conversation when that receiver says, no, I don't feel like, or if that receiver, I shouldn't say when, but if that receiver says, I don't feel like doing X thing, I'm making more than my position coach. Or there could be a quarterback who's making more than Steve Sarkisian. And those are the types of conversations I think every college coach, I'm just using Steve because I cover him and he said it in a presser, but every college coach is facing this. We saw, in college basketball, right? Guys like Jay Wright and others say, thanks, but no thanks. That's just where we're at.
And, kind of goes to Sark's point on the Third and Longhorn podcast with Nick Shuley and those guys. He was talked about, not paying certain amount of players to that number that they want because they want to, still have that culture, right? If Texas really wanted to sign Felix Ojo, they could have got creative. Any school could be like, hey, we'll give you 5-6% of our revenue. I mean, Texas is making how much money from the SEC revenue TV deal? It's there. But to your point, does it become a distraction? And that's what, unfortunately, for Sark in Texas, where they're at right now in this program, they don't have to make sacrifices like that. Okay, I think that's enough NIL talk for today. We can table that and come back next week. Eric Henry from Horns 247, you have two pieces up. And let's start with the confidence level in each Texas football position group. And this is a really good piece here. I think now as we get closer and closer to the football season, I've been thinking more about, okay, what groups do I feel confident in what groups do I have questions in? And we can start from 10-1
Sure.
and begin with your group, Eric. But what is the position group that you have the least amount of confidence going in?
To be clear, when I say the least amount of confidence, it's not that I think this group is going to be a liability or that they're horrible. It's just relative to the rest of the positions on the football team. Number 10, I'm going with offensive line, right? And I'll just kind of, we won't have time to go through all of them. So I'll kind of lump 10 through 7 because in my mind, Cam, 10 through 7 could have been flipped in any different order you want, right? You have offensive line, defensive line, receiver, and then tight end 10 through 7. But with offensive line, it's just a matter of the relative inexperience. Again, not youth, as Steve Sarkisian said it, but inexperience. 4 new starters on the offensive line. How is that going to come together? Let's not take for granted the level of continuity, the level of cohesion that Texas's offensive line had the last 2 years. But like I said, really quick, I can kind of lump all these together here. Defensive tackle, despite the defensive tackle haul that Texas got in the portal, Cam, you only have one player, and that's Murad Watson from Syracuse of the group, of the 5 who they acquired, who have played starter level snaps. And for point of reference, starter level snaps are north of 450. If you take a look, the last 2 years, Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, Vernon Broughton, Alfred Collins have all played 475 snaps or higher. Murad Watson's the only one of the 5 who's played starter level snaps. So how will these guys who they've acquired fare in increased roles? And then with receiver, again, still taking a bit of a wait and see approach with some of the youth behind guys like, Emmett Mosley and Ryan Wingo and others. And I'm really high on Ryan Wingo. I know I've said that before. And then with tight end, same thing. Jack Endries, I think he's going to be an all-conference player, quite frankly. But behind him, you do have some inexperience. And I'll throw number 6 in real quick, because this was the one, Cam, not to steal any of your thunder, that got people riled up on our message boards. Quarterback. I have quarterback at number 6. The reason for that, again, I had some people say, Eric, you're going to sound real foolish when Arch Manning is, a Heisman candidate. It's not number 6. It doesn't have much to do with Arch, although again he is a first-time starter. It's the position room as a whole. You have KJ Lacey, possibly again, more than likely won't be the QB2, but he could be. If something were to happen, hasn't played. Trey Owens, still inexperienced. I think Trey has all the talent in the world, hasn't played a ton. And then, of course, you get Matthew Caldwell from Troy, who was a middle of the pack starter in the Sun Belt. With no disrespect to the Sun Belt, I covered Group of 5, but this wasn't a peak banner year for Sun Belt quarterbacks. So that's why quarterback is at number 6.
Yeah, to your quarterback point, and I think I understand why people could get worked up over where you have wide receiver, offensive lineman, but it's the returning production. Texas is losing their 3 leading receivers from last season, including Gunnar Helm. Offensive line replacing 4 starters. Quarterback, outside of Arch Manning, you don't really have anyone that's had power for reps at this level, and you're playing in the SEC. I mean, Owens, yeah, sure, the talent and the ceiling for Trey Owens and KJ Lacey is through the roof, but we've seen a lot, especially the quarterback position, where we haven't had a season where the number 1 quarterback going into week 1 for Steve Sarkisian has made it through the year without getting injured. And that's why Sark went out and targeted that Troy quarterback. And he talked about it. We have the Houston Touchdown Club and during his spring media availabilities is that, hey, the season is so long and it's so grueling that there's likely at some point Arch is going to get nicked up. That's just the way college football works. No one gets through the entire season staying 100% healthy. Just ask Quinn Ewers that. Ask Hudson Card, Casey Thompson that. That's just part, and especially when you're playing in an SEC conference. I mean, week 1's Ohio State. That's going to be a very physical game. Real quick, from tight end, receiver, defensive tackle, and offensive line, which group do you think will move up this list the most from this season by the end of the year?
Yeah, from those 4, and again, I'll redo this midway through camp and right before the season starts. I would go either wide receiver or offensive line. I think Trevor Gooseby, the ceiling's really high. I think with wide receiver, again, I think I'm just waiting to see how some of those young guys fill in. But Ryan Wingo, I've been on the record of saying this. If Ryan Wingo saw as many targets as Ryan Williams or Jeremiah Smith, he would be in that conversation, right? Yeah. As far as stud freshmen going into their sophomore year. So I said one of those 2.
There's that picture of the Alabama receivers where it's Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Judy, and Harry Ruggs. I think we're going to look back at this receiver class in a couple of years, Eric, in compare it to it, especially with Wingo and DeAndre Moore, who I think are fantastic receivers, just weren't 100% healthy last season. Right. And in the class that Sark brought in with Lockett, French, Livingstone, and McCutcheon, I'm super excited. I think that'll be the group that by the end of the year will be like, holy cow, they impress. And Sark talked about it, I think, on Greg McElroy's show, Always College Football. He said the position group that's not getting a lot of talk this season, not a lot of hype, has been the receiver group. And Sark seems very confident. And we haven't even mentioned Emmett Mosley, the Stanford transfer.
Right.
Okay. Now your top 4 spots. And number 4 did surprise me here. Because for some people, I've seen similar lists. Number 4 has been their number 10.
It's interesting. Yeah. You talk about number 4, the running back spot. I mean, look, all right. CJ Baxter, we've talked about him ad nauseum, former nation's number 1 overall recruit at the running back position. Everything we've heard is that CJ's hitting the ground running. And here's the thing. If the expectation was for him to be the running back 1, maybe I would have the group down a little bit lower. But they're not asking CJ Baxter to come in and carry the load. Quintrevon Weisner is going to be the starting running back. But CJ Baxter coming off of, again, a very serious knee injury, but him at number 2 is the RB2. I'm very comfortable with that, quite frankly. I think that gives him time to find his footing, slowly become a guy who gets, 6 to 9 carries to maybe 9 to 12, 9 to 14 carries. And then you take a look at the guy, Jarrett Gibson and James Simon. We're hearing great things about those guys as well. So that's why I have number 4 there. And again, the reason I said that the position rankings relative to the rest of the team, I think 1 through 3, you have not just great on the team, but arguably tops in the conference or tops in the nation. I would take Texas's linebacker duo in a 2 linebacker base of Anthony Hill and Leonga Lafau over any linebacking duo in the nation. When you go 3 linebackers and you possibly have a Trey Moore or a Brad Spence or a Ty Anthony Smith, I would be still as ecstatic about that. Edge, I think Colin Simmons is going to wreck college football, quite frankly, Cam. I think when you talk about guys in recent history, and I'm not one who engages in being hyperbolic, I think you're talking about Jadeveon Clowney. I think you're talking about Terrell Suggs. I think you're talking about Julius Peppers, as far as guys in the last 25 years of college football who can wreck the game like Colin Simmons can. And then, of course, we have Trey Moore and Ethan Burke and others on the edge there. And then safety, Michael Taft, someone who hasn't got enough love throughout his career. Jelani McDonald, we'll see whether he's going to be a star or safety, but you have Xavier Filsaime, Jordan Johnson, Rubel, and others very high on that safety room.
Yeah, with running back list, I think my only concern is just the health of it. We've heard some talk about CJ Baxter. They're not gonna put him out there until he's ready to go. So he may not be out there in Columbus, but all it takes is one injury. And I love Jared Gibson, baby Rhino, but the question is, can he hold on to the football? So if Gibson can take that next step up, and you tell me that Clark and Baxter will be healthy, then I feel good about this running back room. But for me, a lot of question marks going in your number 1 through 3 spots. I think you can rotate linebacker, safety, edge. All 3 of those could be number 1. And I think by the end of the season, I mean, Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons, Michael Taft, I think will be all SEC, possibly all Americans. And then the same thing for Trey Moore. I think Ethan Burke could have a standout year. And there's a lot of just I don't know, unproven, but a lot of guys that I don't think a lot of maybe casual fans know about. You mentioned Jelani McDonald, who we'll get to in a second, but Jalen Gilbo, who has been injured so much through his career. Now, I think playing cornerback. Filsaime, he was he? I think he was a 5-star coming out of high school. A 5-star? Yeah, right. So there's the talent there. And then Ty Anthony Smith. We've heard Sark talk about a couple times. He made some big plays last season. There was just so much depth there. So looking forward to seeing these guys out there and looking forward to seeing how your list changes throughout the season. Okay, last thing here real quick. Your football expanded production series on Horns 247 and 247sports.com. You mentioned Jelani McDonald. This is the guy that I think can kind of be the utility knife for Steve Sarkisian and PK's defense in 2025.
Yeah, so I did this expanded production series because, of course, with Texas having graduated and sent, double-digit guys to the NFL the last 2 years, again, a lot of guys who haven't played starter-level snaps. Jelani McDonald played in just over 400 snaps last year. Just under 400 snaps last year. You saw flashes of it. So basically, we're just trying to project what that player could look like if they play starter level snaps, whether that is at the star or at safety, or as you said, Cam, kind of a Swiss Army knife. And I think he can be moved around. I think he is a guy as a dime linebacker, excellent. I mean, he could have I'm not trying to, be hyperbolic, a Jade Barron-like season in terms of being at the star, someone who can make 8-9 tackles for loss just due to his physicality, his tackling ability at the line of scrimmage, while also being a playmaker in the secondary. I would point to, if you want to look, right, with each of these guys we profile, there's one game where you get a little glimpse into that sample size. Go watch the Vandy game. That was the game that Andrew Makuba couldn't go. Jelani McDonald to step in and get his first career start, recorded a career high 7 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, was in on a myriad of plays. Also, another guy we're going to spotlight, Kobe Black, also got some crucial playing time in that game as well. Someone else we didn't talk about in the secondary, right? So Jelani McDonald, just trying to do a little projection. I also projected Arch Manning. We expanded his production as well. So go check it out. Take a look. We've got Jelani McDonald, Arch Manning up there. We'll do Kobe Black, Trevor Gooseby, and probably one more before fall camp opens.
And I believe McDonald, he played a lot of linebacker in his high school career too. Am I wrong on that?
He was a jack of all trades. A little bit of linebacker, played corner as well. So, yeah, a guy who was moved around a lot.
And we didn't even mention Derek Williams Jr., who's coming off that season-ending injury, I think right before the Oklahoma game. So this is a Texas defense. You think it's going to be top 5 in the country this season?
Top 3.
Top 3?
The top 5 is lowballing in my mind. Top 3 or bust.
Okay, last thing here. I think next time I'll see you will be next week in Atlanta,
Yes.
the SEC Media Days. What are you looking forward to? What storylines are you going to be watching for next weekend? Besides, of course, Arch Manning walking through those hallways at the College Football Hall of Fame.
I'm super interested to see where the rest of the pack come in, right? Of course, we got to see how Georgia reloads, because in order to be the man, you got to beat the man. We know the Bulldogs beat Texas twice last year. When I say the rest of the pack, OU, Brent Venables, they're betting on a lot of things, most notably John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle coming over to try to revamp that offense. Want to see what's going on with the Sooners. Auburn, they're trying to revamp things with Jackson Arnold. Want to see what's going on there. Florida, DJ Lagway. Some of the what ifs in terms of quarterback. Definitely want to see what's going on there. And then away from SEC Media Days, just going to find some wings, as I typically am. Going to try to avoid, if you know the story, I won't get anyone in trouble. Avoid the seafood quesadilla. Stick with the wings. That is my food recommendation for Atlanta.
He is Eric C. Henry. I always take up way too much of his time. I appreciate your time, brother. Looking forward to seeing you in Atlanta, and check him out on Twitter at Eric C. Henry _ and follow his work at Horns247 and 247sports.com. Hey, enjoy Florida, and I'll see you in Hotlanta next week, brother.
Much appreciated, my man. Take care, Cam.